The sun was rising and the city was waking up. Amid the noise and rush, a young man named Aarav walked alone, lost in deep thought. His clothes were simple, his face was tired, and his eyes were full of questions. He had failed his exam again. It was the third time. Everyone around him seemed to sing the same tune. Maybe he's just not made for success. Aarav had started to believe them. Each failure felt like a heavy rock on his heart. He began to avoid people, staying silent even when his parents tried to cheer him up. But deep inside, one question kept burning. Why not me? What am I missing? That question echoed in his mind, day and night. One evening, Aarav sat on the roof watching the sunset. His best friend Raghav joined him and said jokingly, "Bro, you've become a failure specialist." Aarav managed a small smile but said nothing. Then, Raghav added something that would change everything. "You know," he said, "maybe you don't fail because you're not smart. Maybe you fail because you've already decided you'll fail before even trying." Those words hit Aarav like a lightning bolt. That night, he couldn't sleep. He realized his problem wasn't a lack of talent, it was his mentality. He always started with fear, not belief. The next morning, Aarav made a silent promise to himself. "This time, I will fight my mind first." He began changing small habits. He started waking up early, stopped blaming himself for past mistakes, and began reading motivational books. Every single day, he wrote one line in his diary: "I can do it." At first, it felt fake, like he was just pretending. But slowly, those words started to sound real. Of course, life didn't get easy overnight. People still laughed at him, whispering, "He'll just fail again." But this time, Aarav didn't argue. He just smiled and kept working. Deep inside, he was building something powerful, a winner's mentality. One day, while studying at the library, he met an old man. The man saw Aarav's notes and asked, "Preparing again?" Aarav nodded. The man smiled kindly and said, "Good, because winners aren't those who never fail. Winners are those who never stop believing after they fail." Those words became Aarav's fuel. He started visualizing his success every night before sleep. He stopped comparing himself to others. For the first time, his focus shifted from the fear of failure to the joy of growth. But just when everything seemed to be going right, something unexpected happened. A week before his final exam, Aarav's father fell ill. To help pay for medicine, Aarav had to take a part-time job at a local store. His study time shrank, and the pressure mounted. Those old fears tried to creep back in, but Aarav looked himself in the mirror and whispered, "Not this time. I control my mind. My mind doesn't control me." The night before the exam, he sat under a dim light, exhausted but completely determined. A strange sense of calm washed over him. He finally understood. Success doesn't begin when you get the results. Success starts the moment you stop doubting yourself. With that newfound belief, he closed his books and smiled. Tomorrow wasn't just another exam. Tomorrow was the day he would test not just his knowledge but the strength of his new mentality. If Aarav's story resonates with you, remember that your biggest battle is often within your own mind. The city was quiet the next morning, but inside Aarav a storm was brewing. With the sky still dark, he set out for his exam. His father, weak but smiling, offered a few simple words from his bed. "Do your best, son. That's all that matters." Aarav simply nodded. He knew this wasn't just about grades, it was about proving his own belief to himself. As he walked, his mind replayed old tapes, failures, the mocking laughter of others, the whispers of, "You can't do it." But something was different this time. He took a deep breath, a quiet defiance rising within him. "Let them doubt," he told himself. "I won't." At the exam hall, the air was thick with nervous energy. Students frantically flipped through their notes, but Aarav didn't. He just closed his eyes, repeating a simple mantra, "Calm mind, strong mind." Then the bell rang. The papers landed on his desk. Aarav's eyes scanned the first question, and his stomach dropped. It was from the exact topic he had to skip because of his part-time job. For a terrifying moment, fear gripped him. That familiar, venomous voice whispered, You're going to fail again. But then he remembered his reflection in the mirror, the promise he made. I control my mind. A faint smile touched his lips. He closed his eyes for just 3 seconds and said silently, Think positive. You've got this. And then, something almost magical happened. His mind, now calm, started to connect the dots. It wasn't perfect, but fragments of information, bits and pieces he'd skimmed over, began to surface. He picked up his pen and started writing. 1 word, then 1 line, then a full paragraph. He wasn't aiming for a perfect answer. He was aiming to give his best effort. He ignored the confident scribbling of students around him, staying locked in his own zone, focused and calm. When the final bell rang, he walked out not knowing if he would pass or fail, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He had faced his biggest opponent, the one inside his own head, and he hadn't backed down. The following days were a blur of work, caring for his father and waiting. Every night he'd look up at the stars and whisper, I did my best. The rest is destiny. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. The result board was a chaotic scene of shouts, laughter, and tears. With a pounding heart and cold hands, Aarav slowly approached, his eyes scanning the long lists. Line after line, his anxiety grew. And then, he saw it. Aarav Sharma passed with distinction. He just stood there, frozen, as tears welled up in his eyes. It wasn't just about passing the exam. It was about proving that the stories we tell ourselves matter more than our circumstances. His friend Raghav rushed over, shouting, Bro, you did it. Aarav smiled, a deep, knowing smile, and said quietly, No, we did it. Me and my mindset. That evening, he handed the result sheet to his father, who was sitting up, his face glowing with pride. With tears in his eyes, his father said, I knew it. You never lost, son. You just had to change how you thought. Later that night, Aarav sat on the same rooftop where he once felt so broken. But everything looked different. The stars seemed brighter. The air felt lighter. He finally understood a profound truth. Life doesn't change when your situation changes. It changes when your mentality does. This victory gave him a newfound confidence, but life had more tests in store, challenges that would push his new mindset to its limits. Because real success isn't the end of the journey. It's just the beginning of the next one. A few months had passed since Aarav's big success. Everyone in the neighborhood was now talking about him. That is the boy who never gave up. But success, as they say, brings new challenges. After passing his exams, Aarav decided to apply for a job in a reputed company. His dream was to help his father recover and give his family a better life. He spent hours preparing his resume, practicing interview questions, and imagining his new journey. On the day of the interview, he wore his only formal shirt, clean but slightly faded. He looked in the mirror and smiled. Confidence, not clothes, makes a man, he whispered. When he reached the office, everything looked grand. Shiny floors, people in suits, and walls filled with motivational quotes. Aarav felt a bit nervous, but he reminded himself, You've faced worse. Stay calm. Inside the interview room, 3 people sat across the table. They asked him tough questions. Some he answered confidently, some he didn't know. At the end, one interviewer looked at him and said politely, You're smart, but we're looking for someone with experience. Aarav smiled, thanked them, and walked out. He didn't feel defeated, not this time. He said to himself, Rejection doesn't mean failure, it's just redirection. He applied again and again, company after company, interview after interview. Each time the answer was the same, We'll let you know. But no one ever did. After 3 months, his savings were gone. His father's health was slowly improving, but the medicine was expensive. To make ends meet, Aarav took on small freelance jobs, delivering parcels and tutoring kids just to survive. Some nights he sat quietly, staring at the ceiling, asking himself, Did I dream too big? But deep inside, that one line still burned bright. Mentality is everything. One evening, while delivering a parcel to a small startup office, Aarav overheard two men arguing. Their marketing intern had just quit, and they were desperate for someone to handle basic social media tasks. Aarav hesitated for a moment, then knocked on the door. "Sir, I couldn't help but overhear. I know social media basics. Can I try?" They looked at him, a delivery boy offering to work in marketing. One of them laughed, but the other said, "Why not? We've got nothing to lose." Aarav started that same day. He didn't know much, but he learned quickly. Every night he watched tutorials, studied trends, and applied new ideas. Within a month, their pages started growing. The boss noticed. One morning, the owner called him in and said, "You've done great work. You're no longer our helper. You're our official marketing assistant." Aarav couldn't stop smiling. From delivery boy to marketing assistant, it wasn't luck. It was mentality. But soon after, another storm arrived. The company began to face financial loss and many employees were laid off. Aarav's name was on that list too. For a moment, it felt like life was testing him again. He walked out of the office with his small bag and an empty heart. The same streets, the same silence, but this time his mindset was different. He looked up at the sky and said, "You can knock me down again, but I'll rise again because I'm not the same person I was." That night, Aarav made a new decision. He would start something of his own. He didn't know what, how, or when, but he knew one thing for sure. If others can build dreams, so can I. And with that belief, he took his notebook and wrote the first words of his new journey. My mind, my mission. Have you ever felt like your mind is a crowded, noisy room? Ideas, doubts, dreams, fears, all screaming for attention at the same time? That was Aarav's world every single night. The thought of starting his own venture was a thrilling, yet terrifying roller coaster. He had no money, no team, and zero experience. All he had was a dream and a powerful belief. Mentality can change destiny. He spent days hunched over an old notebook sketching out his future. Business plans, goals, even clumsy logo designs filled the pages. It was a chaotic mess, but it was his. It was the blueprint for building something from absolutely nothing. One morning, a simple conversation at a roadside tea stall changed everything. He overheard two students discussing how small businesses were struggling to get noticed online. That was it, the spark. He would be the one to help them. And just like that, Mindset Media, a small digital marketing agency, was born. His first office, the tiny room he lived in, his first clients were the local shopkeepers he saw every day, a baker, a tailor, a small bookstore owner. Most were skeptical about social media, but Aarav's passion was contagious. He'd tell them, "Sir, you believe in your business, right? Just let me show everyone else why they should too." The initial projects didn't bring in much money, but they gave him something far more precious: confidence. He learned to negotiate, to manage, and most importantly, to deliver on his promises. Slowly, whispers turned into a buzz around the neighborhood. There is a young man who can grow your business online. Within 6 months, Aarav wasn't alone anymore. He had a small team of 2 interns and a single, often overheating laptop. Seeing his father's health improve and his proud smile gave Aarav a strength he'd never known. But as we all know, with great success comes even greater challenges. A massive opportunity landed on his desk, a project from a major company. This was it, the break he'd been working for. He poured his soul into it, working day and night, fueled by ambition and countless cups of tea. He skipped meals, he skipped sleep. His body was exhausted, but his spirit was on fire. And then, just 2 days before the deadline, disaster struck. His computer crashed. Everything, all his files, designs, and months of hard work, vanished into a blank screen. He was frozen. His hands trembled. For a moment, the old, panicked Aarav returned, the one who would blame fate and give up. But then he remembered his own mantra. Mentality is everything. He stood up, took a deep breath, and said, "Maybe the system failed, but I won't." He rallied his team. Instead of despair, he offered motivation. "We've done this once, we can do it again. Let's rebuild." For the next 48 hours, they worked non-stop, recreating every single piece of the campaign from scratch. They were beyond exhausted, but they were incredibly proud. A week later, an email arrived. His hands shook as he clicked it open. The subject line was simple. Congratulations, project approved. Tears of relief and joy streamed down his face. He smiled and whispered to himself, hard work pays, but belief pays more. That victory was the turning point. Mindset Media grew, earning more clients, more recognition, and more trust. But Aarav knew better than to get comfortable. As he looked out at the city lights that night, he made a promise. The real battle isn't with failure, it's with the comfort that success can bring. Because when your mentality is strong, every failure is just a lesson, and every success becomes a new responsibility. Months flew by, and Mindset Media was no longer just a small startup. Aarav's company began collaborating with major brands, and his phone was perpetually buzzing with new clients, exciting offers, and incredible opportunities. The very people who had once overlooked him now sang his praises. Aarav is a natural-born leader, they'd say. He's an absolute genius. He had fame, money, and respect, everything he had ever dreamed of. But with this success came something Aarav never anticipated: immense pressure. With 10 employees and a mountain of projects, rest became a luxury he couldn't afford. Every client demanded immediate results, and his team was showing signs of burnout. Aarav's patience wore thin. He started shouting over minor mistakes, skipping family dinners, and surviving on just a few hours of sleep each night. His father, noticing the change, gently told him, "Son, you've conquered the world, but don't lose yourself in the process." Aarav forced a weak smile. "Don't worry, Dad. I'm just busy." But deep down he knew something was terribly wrong. One night, driving home after another exhausting meeting, his phone buzzed relentlessly. Clients complaining, deadlines slipping. His head throbbed. He suddenly pulled over near the same old tea stall where his entire journey had begun. The owner recognized him and remarked, "You've changed, sir. You used to smile a lot more." Those simple words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Aarav realized he had become a prisoner of his own success. The very mindset that had fueled his rise, discipline, belief, and positivity, was now buried under a heap of pride and pressure. He went home and found his old diary, the one where he had once confidently written, "I can do it." Flipping through the pages, he saw his old notes, his dreams, and a quote he'd written on the very first page. "Success is not how high you climb, but how strong you stand when you fall." That night, sitting quietly on his balcony, gazing at the stars, he whispered to himself, "I forgot where I came from." The next morning he gathered his team. They were all expecting another stressful meeting about deadlines, but Aarav surprised them. "I owe every one of you an apology," he began. "I became so obsessed with results that I forgot our true purpose. This company was never just about making money. It was about nurturing a mindset. Let's bring that back." A hush fell over the room, followed by a slow, then roaring round of applause. It was a small moment, but it changed everything. They began working together again, not as employees, but as a family. Aarav even introduced a new rule: no work after 5 p.m. on Fridays. Instead, they would share one life lesson they learned that week. The company's energy shifted. Productivity soared, creativity flourished, and Aarav felt alive again. But just when things were looking up, disaster struck. One of his biggest clients suddenly canceled all their contracts due to market instability. It was a devastating blow. Many advised Aarav to cut costs, lay off staff, and save his money. But he refused. "I didn't build this company to quit when things get tough," he declared. "I built it to stand tall when it shakes." He dug into his personal savings to pay his team and keep morale high. "We will rise again," he told them with unshakable confidence. "We always do." For weeks they worked tirelessly, brainstorming new ideas through late nights and long meetings, but nothing seemed to stick. The team was exhausted. Then one evening a call came from the owner of a small bakery, one of Aarav's very first clients. "Sir," the owner said, "my business survived because of your help years ago. I told my friend about you. He runs a large food brand and desperately needs digital marketing help." That one call opened a brand new door. This new project was even bigger than the one they had lost. Aarav looked up at the sky and smiled, whispering, "See? A storm doesn't destroy a strong mind, it just cleans its path." Have you ever felt like you were on top of the world, only for life to pull the rug out from under you? This is a story about that moment and what comes after. Aarav's company, Mindset Media, was finally back on its feet. After a tough period, a massive new project breathed life back into the office. Laughter echoed in the hallways. Whiteboards were filled with brilliant ideas, and you could see the confidence in everyone's eyes. This project was huge, a national marketing campaign for a major food brand. It was their chance to hit the big leagues, but the stakes were terrifyingly high. It could make them or break them completely. Aarav was working around the clock, and his team, inspired by his dedication, matched his pace. But as the launch date neared, the pressure became immense. Deliveries were late, deadlines were missed, and technical glitches popped up one after another. Through it all, Aarav kept the team going with a simple motto: "We don't quit halfway." Then, just 1 week before the launch, his world stopped. A phone call. His father had collapsed. Aarav rushed to the hospital, his heart pounding with a fear he'd never known. The doctor's words were a blur. Critical condition. Immediate surgery. He found himself sitting outside the ICU, his hand pressed against the glass, whispering to his father, "Dad, please fight, I still need you." His mind was tearing itself apart. The company, the project, the deadlines, it all felt so meaningless now. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from his team, all asking for direction, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. For the first time in his life as a leader, Aarav felt utterly lost, caught between his duty as a son and his responsibility to his team. That night, alone on a cold hospital bench, he scrolled through his phone and landed on a picture. It was from the day he'd passed a major exam, his father beaming with a proud, sparkling smile. He could almost hear his dad's voice. "Do your best, son. That's all that matters." The memory brought a flood of tears. He realized his father never cared about the money or the fame. He only cared about the effort, the heart Aarav put into his work. The next morning, Aarav walked back into the office. His team was shocked to see him. Standing before them, his voice was quiet, but steady. "My father is fighting for his life, and I'm here, fighting for the dream he always believed in. We're going to finish this project, not for the money, not for the fame, but to prove that the right mindset can conquer any pain." His words struck a chord deep within everyone. For the next 7 days, the team worked with a newfound unity and passion. It was no longer just a job, it was a mission. Aarav split his time between the hospital and the office, running on fumes and sheer willpower. Finally, launch day arrived. The campaign was an explosive success. It trended everywhere, praised by critics and clients alike. Messages poured in. Mindset Media nailed it. Holding his phone, buzzing with notifications of his greatest professional triumph, Aarav rushed to the hospital to share the news. But when he arrived, he found his father sleeping peacefully. Too peacefully. A doctor approached him and said softly, "He was proud of you until the very end." Aarav's world shattered. In the deafening silence, he whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me how to fight." The world celebrated his success, but only he knew the unbearable price he had paid. Yet in the depths of his grief, Aarav didn't break. He found a new purpose. He used his company's platform to launch the Mind Project, an initiative to mentor young people, teaching them resilience and self-belief. Every weekend, he shared his story in schools and colleges. "If life hits you hard," he'd tell them, "hit back with your mentality. Your mind can lift you higher than any storm can throw you down." People no longer saw him as just an entrepreneur. He became a mentor. Aarav's eyes still held a trace of sadness, but they also held a profound peace. He had lost his father, but he had found a mission that would outlive him. Because sometimes life takes something precious away, only to give you something greater in return. A purpose. Years went by, and the name Aarav Sharma became a symbol of inspiration. The boy who once failed, who doubted every step he took, who struggled just to get by, had grown into a man who built confidence in others. His company, Mindset Media, had blossomed beyond his wildest dreams. But it wasn't the size of the company that made it special. It was its soul. Every single person who worked there knew the motto by heart: change your mind, change your life. Aarav dedicated most of his time to mentoring young people, students feeling lost, small business owners on the brink of giving up, and anyone who felt like hope was a distant memory. His initiative, the Mind Project, touched thousands of lives across the country. People flocked to hear him speak, not because he was rich, but because he was real. He'd often stand on stage, a genuine smile on his face, and say, "I'm not special. I just made a decision to stop giving up when things got hard." One day, an invitation arrived. It was from his old college, the very place where he had once failed, the place that was a source of so much shame and feelings of worthlessness. As he walked through those familiar gates, a flood of old memories rushed back, the gnawing fear, the heavy shame, the sharp pain of his past. But this time he walked with his head held high, a sense of pride in his steps. The hall was packed to the brim with eager students. As Aarav took the stage, he paused, taking a moment to look at all the young, hopeful faces staring back at him. He began, his voice steady and clear. "Many years ago, I sat right where you are in one of those very chairs. I thought my life was over because I failed. But I was so wrong. Life doesn't end when you fall. It begins the moment you decide to stand up again." He shared everything with them, his struggles, the countless rejections, the night his computer crashed and took his dreams with it, the unbearable pain of losing his father, and the profound lessons each of those moments taught him. The students listened in complete silence, their eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. Then he said something that would echo in their minds forever. "People always talk about talent, luck, or opportunity. But I'm here to tell you the real secret. Mentality is everything. If your mind truly believes it, your body will find a way to follow. If your thoughts remain strong, no failure, no setback can ever break you." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. In the crowd, he saw students with tears in their eyes, not of sadness, but of newfound hope. Aarav smiled, feeling his father's presence in that very room, as if he were watching from somewhere above, filled with pride. After the speech, a young student approached him, his voice trembling slightly. "Sir," he said, "I was about to quit college, I was done. But after hearing you, I want to try again." Aarav placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Good. That's exactly where success begins. The moment you decide to try just one more time." That night, back home, Aarav stood on his balcony, gazing at the same stars he used to watch all those years ago when life felt impossibly dark. He whispered into the night, "Dad, we did it." A smile spread across his face, not because his life was perfect, but because he had finally learned the most powerful truth of all. You can lose money, you can lose friends, you can lose opportunities, but as long as you don't lose your mentality, you will always rise again. The next morning, he walked into his office. A new poster hung proudly on the wall. In bold letters it read, "Mentality is everything." And beneath it, in smaller print, was his favorite quote. "Don't wait for the world to believe in you. Believe in yourself so much that the world has no choice but to follow." Aarav looked around at his team, a vibrant group of young dreamers, all smiling, all working towards a common purpose. He whispered to himself, "This isn't just my story. This is the story of every fighter who simply refused to quit." And with that, Aarav closed his eyes, taking a deep, peaceful breath. Peaceful, he had transformed his pain into power, his loss into a lasting purpose, and his dreams into a legacy. Because your life truly changes the day your mentality changes. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content that empowers you to change your life. See you in the next one.